Well, hello everyone. This is Jeanne-white, and I am recording from Dedham, Massachusetts. I'm the host of Social Connections on Passionate World Radio. And today, to me, it's a very fulfilling day. I have two excellent guests. One is Kris-Korman, and he is the historian and spokesperson for Harvey-Korman. And we also have Wesley Hyatt, and he is the author of the Carol-Burnett Show Companion. And welcome, both of you.
Good morning, Jeannie. How are you?
Good. And Wesley?
I'm doing good. Good to hear from you, Jeannie. Thank you.
Yes, me too. All right, Wesley, I'm going to put it into yours because you are, this book that you wrote for the Carol-Burnett show was just phenomenal. If anything and everything you want to know about that show is there.
And more.
And definitely more, and
Thank you.
It was a brilliant show, and you showed it in different parts of different chapters. So what is it, what was it that made you want to do this particular book? Was it to do with the anniversary, or was it something that was a burning situation for you to do this book?
Well, I had grown up as a child. Kris and I are about the same age. I won't give it away totally there, but we both were familiar with the show when it was going on in its original production during the 70s. And I loved the show, loved watching it. It was something our families watched a lot on Saturday nights. Was the time it was the longest running in that slot. When it went off, I thought, this would be a great book to have, a great show to have a book on, because this was a time when TV history was coming alive and books of that sort were coming out. Well, cut to about 20 years later, and I finally started writing books myself as an adult, and I'd written several of them, and I was thinking about what to do next, and I watched on TV the promotion for a recent collection of Carol-Burnett show DVDs, and that hit me. I was like, God, I would love to do a thing on that, but that's so much. That's 11 years. That's nearly 300 episodes and everything.
Yeah.
And I remembered that Carol had said she had donated a lot of her old shows to the UCLA Film Archive, and then I looked on there and I saw what they had available. They didn't have everything available, but they had a good enough chunk that I thought, I can actually get a decent episode guide out and history of this if I start applying myself to do it, and I want to do this, and that was my motivation for doing the book.
Well, I think we're all lucky for that.
We're fortunate for that.
Right, and you too, Kris, right, on this book?
Well, I was amazed that Wesley is the first one that it would. There are books that I don't know if there's a book on Laughing. There's a lot of books are not really written on. Steve Martin wrote one through Greg Garrison, but outside of that, Variety is not attacked a lot. So Wesley is the first one that attacked the Burnett show because Laughing was not attacked. Ed Sullivan's show, I don't know if books have been written on a lot about the Ed Sullivan twist of the town. So when Wesley approached me, I was still living in San Diego, and he told me that somebody told him the best person to talk about Harvey in the Burnett show is Kris.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have Wesley, I have a thesaurus mind about this stuff. And remember, I was only, I was born the year the Burnett show went on. So I was 10 by the time my dad had left the show. So my understanding is that and my memories according to the tapings, are vibrant in my head.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fabric of my childhood. The best thing I can say I can say a lot of great things about the book, but I'll tell you, people who wrote the book, for me, it was a transcript of my childhood. I felt like I relived my childhood. You can open the book, and I can hear Peter Matz's orchestrations from the band shell. If I open the book, I can picture and hearing, Bob Mackey's talking about, hey, everybody make sure you're in your costumes. I could smell the paint of the walls of the sets in the hallway. It was so vibrant in my head. And the best thing I can say about Wesley's book is that when you read his book, and you feel like you're reliving your childhood.
Really?
Or,
It is.
yeah,
I agree with you. Yes.
and for people who have never read it, if somebody came over to this country, they said, "What book would I want to write about a great show?" I'd say you would read the book about the Carol-Burnett show.
Correct.
And I would tell everybody, before you even attack watching the 50-year anniversary from Star Vista, if you really want a great conduit to that, you should read Wesley's book first and then watch the DVDs. Then you'll have a greater appreciation for the iconic talents of these performers on both sides of the camera. So,
I agree with you. I agree with you. And Wesley, I know we highlighted on some things. What was it about the first year for Carol Burnett? I mean, for her to be a woman that was, the main character of the whole show, basically in the beginning, right? And how that transpired.
Well, it was very interesting because, as Carol said herself, there'd never been a woman hosting a comedy variety show. Dinah Shore had her show, but it was more music than comedy itself. And it came about in an odd situation. Carol came to national prominence from her work on the Gary Moore Show. She made her one of her first professional appearances on his daytime show in the 50s, and then when he got his nighttime show, there was one show in 1959 where Martha Raye got ill and couldn't perform, and they needed someone to learn the sketches and do everything in a hurry, and Carol filled in wonderfully and got a huge ovation for it, and that led to her becoming a regular on the show from 59 to 62. She left in 62. At the height of her popularity, the show was, I think, number 12 in the ratings, and she'd earned already at least one Emmy that year, and she got a contract set up with CBS that would put her in exclusive use of the network over the next 10 years, and one of the most unusual elements of the contract was that she could at any time request to have 30 shows of a variety series in her name in the first 5 years of the contract. For reasons nobody seems to understand, CBS let that happen just, I guess, because they wanted to have her bad enough, and I guess they thought, well, she's not really going to do it. We're just putting that in there to sweeten it. Well, a few years later, come around, I think, Christmas time of 1966, Carol had moved from New York to Hollywood, and the offers were not coming in as strongly as she and the family had hoped, and then it hit them. We have that policy there, and as CBS said, all you got to do is just push the button. So she called up Mike Dan, and he was a little surprised to learn that in fact did exist, but he was like, okay, I'm going to agree to that condition on what we have. And now, legally, he could have put it anywhere, but he decided to put it against a tough time slot at the time, which was opposite I Spy on NBC and The Big Valley on ABC. Monday nights at 10 had been a real problem area for CBS. They had no show had lasted more than a year, I think, during the 1960s on there because it was just, for some reason, the audiences were not attracted to it. So it was not the most exciting, promising thing there. In fact, one of the writers on the show there, Buzz Cohen, said that when they went when they were telling people they were going to move from New York to Los Angeles to work on the show, some network executive at CBS told them, well, good luck, but that show's not going to last long, to be honest, What really set it apart was that after doing the first couple of shows, what most people think is that Jim Nabors was a guest on her first show. He was on her first show that they aired. The first show they taped was with Mike Douglas, the talk show host at the time, and Lynn Redgrave. And that show was pretty ragged. They didn't show that until New Year's Day in the first season. That tells you something, how they buried it a couple of months after it went, because one, the show did not open with her doing the question and answers. It opened with a big production number, and it was going that way. And they did the same for the second show they taped, which was with Martha Raye and Juliet Prowse. And then her husband, Joe Hamilton at the time, who was the producer of the show, and the executive producer was Bob Banner. They sat down with Carol and said, you know what you used to do at the Gary Moore show in take questions from the audience when they'd have breaks or have a mechanical failure? And she said yes. He said, we want you to do that at the top of the show. We think that's what the show needs to get it really kicked off, for people to know who you are before you go into all these sketches and playing these crazy characters, and gives them something to relate to. Mm-hmm. And she was a little reluctant, but she went ahead and did it on the third show, which was with James Neighbors, and it came out very well. And from there, after the first couple of weeks, she had a pretty good assortment of guest stars, because Jim Neighbors, if you remember, was a big hit at the time with Gomer Pyle. That was a top 10 show, so that gave her a good kickoff there. A few weeks later, she had Lucille Ball on there along with a guy named Tim Conway, so that was a good combination for her, too. And to everyone's surprise, the show was beginning to win its time slot from what it had against the competition. And by the middle of the year, it was pretty much a given that it was going to last a couple more years at the time. So that's, in a nutshell, how it went there. You can see, and it's interesting watching the shows in the first season, because the quality varies greatly. There are times when there's a lot of more music than comedy. There are times when they use Harvey excellently, and there's times when you're just like, where is Harvey at? What are they doing here? And there was one show when they had Gary Moore and Durwood Kirby back, and it felt like it was an episode of the Gary Moore Show, with doing things like that. It not quite found its voice, but it did well enough that it did get good ratings, and it got the first of what is the important thing. Every year it was nominated for Outstanding Variety Series for 11 seasons, which is incredible. No other series has ever done that.
That's incredible, really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in some ways there was a little bit of a struggle going on, maybe, like you say, trying to find their voice and their way in the big pond they were in.
Originally, CBS had taught, and Wesley knows this, they went to Carol and said, we want you to do a sitcom called Here's Agnes. And she said, I don't want to do one character all week. I want to do what I did on Gary Moore. I want to have guest stars. I want to have a company of people and music and everything. I don't want to play one character. And that's because that's what she came from doing, which is variety. And everybody said, D. Martin, Sid Caesar, Carl Reiner, those people who do, those men do variety. Women don't. And Carol said, no. Well, why can't I do it? And it's a then we'll buy it.
That Chris mentioned Carl Reiner, because originally that's who Carol and them wanted to have as her co-star on it, but he was too busy at the time, he just had a success with The Russians Are Coming, and some other, and he said he just was too busy to do that. But he was very instrumental in giving them the idea of adding Lyle Wagner. He told her, you need to have like a Rock Hudson type to work off you, so you can kind of,
moon and spoon over.
Yeah, exactly. The thing Carol was known for on the Gary Moore Show, going crazy over guys. So he gave them that idea. And then for the idea of Vicki Lawrence, it was because they thought they'd have a sketch based on somewhat Carol's own life and have it called Carol and Sis. And Vicki Lawrence was not automatically drafted. Carol was familiar with Vicki because Vicki won a Carol lookalike contest and actually came to visit Carol when she gave birth, but she had to audition for the role.
With another girl, Heather North.
Heather North, who I talked to. Heather North is best known as the voice of Daphne on the Scooby-Doo cartoons. She's also done some other acting work. She had a bigger career at the time than Vicki did. She had done like a soap opera called Paradise Bay for a few years and gotten that together. And she had a big bunch of balloons waiting there saying congratulations for her, and Vicki felt deflated. But Vicki had the advantage in that she did look a lot like Carol at the time, and she actually dyed her hair even more red to make it look like she was Carol's sister. And she and Heather both, there was kind of like, I think they said it was like a draw as to what people thought they were in the test phase. So they went ahead and they picked Vicki, and Heather told me she didn't regret that. She's like, I could never have done what Vicki did with the mama character and so on there. And Heather had a very nice career later on as working on Days of Our Lives a few times, and she married the director on the show, and they had a long marriage until he died, I think in 2015. So
Wesley Kenny.
Yes, Wesley Kennedy. Very, very good there. And then as for Harvey, now do you want to tell them how your dad got the job on the show?
Well, Wesley will bear this out, which I thought was interesting, is that at that time CBS was reluctant to take one actor from one show and put it on another. But the argument that doesn't really make sense because Danny Kaye was going off in '67, the fall of '67. My dad was going, I need to find work. He'd already done 4 years on Danny Kaye, and I say this jokingly, people don't suffer for their art anymore. Well, that day my dad suffered for his art and for the rest of our family because Carol threw my father over the hood of an Edsel and said, "You have to do my show," because basically they said, "We want you to be our Carl Reiner to what Carl was to Sid." And my father had established already somewhat of a brand of being a great sketch comedian. And she needed a better, as they say, use the analogy, and Wesley uses it as I do, is a great tennis player. You want a better player to play with you because it elevates your game.
Right.
And Harvey had been setting up the staging for the Steve Allen comedy show during the summer of '67, and Carol and them actually had ran into him, like Chris said, in the parking lot there at CBS at a Hollywood Studios there, and basically said, "We want you," and he's like, "Okay."
Yeah, my father didn't. I mean, my sister had already been born. I was born that year, so my dad didn't know where his next dime was coming from. Back then, when you worked in L.A., there was only 3 channels, so you made your headway with all the casting people, Screen Gems, Midway. So my dad didn't know where, after the Burnett show, where he would have gone. I mean, to be fair, people say, well, your father would have gone and done some, Playhouse 90, and he was a great dramatic actor, but people didn't see him that way. So he got pigeonholed as a sketch comedian, which, in the vernacular of the business, that could be a pro or a con because it's dangerous nowadays. You get pigeonholed very easily. And my father, he came from Goodman Theater in Chicago. He'd studied with Uta Hagen, a great drama teacher, and he didn't really want to get pigeonholed. And he'd done a play in Santa Monica in '59, and Charles Lawton and Betty Davis hailed him as the next Olivier. And he thought, well, I'll be a dramatic actor. And Danny Kaye kind of changed the whole path for there. So,
it does. I mean, it was worldwide for him. I mean, he was made for. This is my opinion, Wesley and Chris. He was made for that show.
He was. It was definitely, as I point out, they needed someone who was able to handle a lot of dialects like he does, and could also sing and dance well, which Harvey could do as well at the same time too, and was able to give to the writers. This was the most important thing about Harvey, is that he was able to give a sense of grounding to the sketches there, that he could, he could create believable characters there, and he would also study the scripts well, and he would mine the laughs out of them, sometimes getting more laughs than they expected from the lines themselves because of the way he would inflect them and time them. He really had a great craftsmanship about doing the show, and in fact, it's not surprising that the first Emmy that the Carol-Burnett show won was for Harvey in the second year for what he had done there. He really was quite unmatched in anything, and I think we saw it. I showed Chris a sketch that Harvey did in the first year that they remade a few years later with Lyle in the same role, and there was just no comparison. I mean, Lyle's a nice actor, but Harvey had a better sense of what to do with that character, and that was the key thing. I think the show, I really question whether the show could have prospered as well if they didn't have Harvey in it. That's how important he was.
Well, listen, no, I mean, when I was home and everything, and when we were younger and we watched it, I know we loved Carol-Burnett and we loved all the others, but we always wanted to see Harvey-Korman. Always.
Mm-hmm. I'll second that.
And it was so to us because that was to us, that was the show. We loved him, you know.
Yeah.
He was so funny, but everyone worked off of him, and he worked off of them, and to me, it was magic.
Carol was smart enough, like with Gary Moore, if you surround yourself with great people, and Gary Moore had Marion Lauren, she had Robert Goulet, she had great people around Gary, and she learned that you surround yourself with great people, it elevates your game. Mind you, but my dad was probably the strongest. Now, remember, Carol had just come off Once Upon a Mattress. She might have been a bigger name than my father, but my father probably, and I'm not being arrogant about this, my father probably had more experience and more training than Carol had. Even though she was a bigger name, my father could bring something that no one else could bring to the show.
I'm sorry, but I think he had timing.
He did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's something I don't know if you can train. I don't know if you can train to have that kind of ear to understand what the subtext is about and find. Or my father used to say, it's basically an actor doing comedy. You have to play the reality, even if you're doing farce or you're doing satire. You have to play the reality. And the reason why he knows all this, all these nuances of acting, was because of his training.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody at that time would have thought that those elements matter. But it mattered to my father because my father could only approach it as an actor doing comedy.
Right.
If you adhere to what the jokes were, and Wesley will tell you, my dad was gold to the writers because the writers could write something and my father could find a nugget in there and say, let's play it this way.
Yeah.
And the writers would go, yeah, you'd have to trust Harvey. Even though Harvey wasn't the star, people trusted his ear.
Oh, sure. He had more knowledge. But I wanted to talk a little bit now about, wasn't there an issue about the writers at some point when she let them go?
Yes. The show was going relatively smoothly until the 5th season. She had most of the writers she had from the start had stayed with her, or they went on to other bigger projects that they needed, and they just added a few others going on there. The problem was, I think what had happened was that was a year that Bob Banner had left to pursue doing TV movies and other projects, and they elevated Arnie Rosen, the head writer, to producer status, along with Joe serving as the new executive producer. The problem was that Arnie got a little bit tired and would just go ahead and say, why don't we just remake some of the sketches and do that sort of thing? And it became an issue as the series came on. I think you can see in the book, it was like every third episode they'd have a remake of a sketch that they did a couple of years
earlier. Oh, yes, I read that. Yes,
And sometimes with the same people. And in fact, I saw the infamous dentist sketch there with Harvey and Tim Conway. They went ahead and they just replayed that entire sketch. They didn't even restage it. They just replayed it there just for one of the shows. And when you have that going on, plus not any new material that's really challenging anyone, you've got a tough situation going there for Carol. There was some stuff that was working. That was the year that the great Nora Desmond was introduced. So Woody Kling, the writer who wrote that one, his job was safe. And the spoofs of the movies and the TV shows remained strong, and the people who did that were Larry Siegel and Stan Hart. Stan Hart, unfortunately, we lost recently this year. But they did a superb job. And then there was also Roger Beatty, who wrote the Carol and Sis sketches. Those were all working, so their jobs were safe, but the other ones weren't. And Carol made the decision that she's like, okay, I'm going to have to change the writing staff, most of the writing staff, because I'm not getting challenged. Harvey isn't getting challenged. And we've got to see if we can do something different and better here, because this is not satisfying me. And so the ironic thing is that after they announced this thing, the Emmy Awards came up, and of course, who won the Emmy for Outstanding Writing? The Carol-Burnett Show did. So it was a rather interesting period of them getting there. But truth be told, though, I've seen it there, and I know Carol has said, I try not to say it, but I think she considers it the weakest season they had there, basically because there was a lot of stuff that was not up to par, and just rehashing previous things. The show still stayed good in the ratings, nevertheless. This was when, after 4 years on Monday nights on CBS switched it to Wednesday nights at 8 to kick off its schedule that way. Now it was losing a little bit, but coming in a very comfortable second place to Adam 12 and the NBC mystery movie, which at the time had Columbo and McLeod and McMillan and wife and so on there. So the ratings went down a little bit. They were still a top 30 show. So that might have played.
I think the highest they ever got. Steve Beverly could probably tell me this, and you could. I think the best they did was 11.
They had 13 in the third season. Yeah, they were number 13, including there was 1 week when they were number 2 when they had Peggy Lee on the show with Tim Conway near the end. Yeah, it was very much so. But as someone said, that Carol and them kind of liked being in the 20s. In the ratings of the 20 to 30 range of the ratings. That way, that meant that you were doing well enough, but they wouldn't pay as much attention to you if you were a top 10 show, and have a lot of pressure to do it on that way. Carol, I think, may have had a little pressure because she was the only show, she admitted she was the only show that probably didn't have rock acts at the time. She had a few more upbeat groups later on in the later years, but I mean, if you look on the first 5 years, I think it was Dionne Warwick and Sonny and Cher and the Carpenters were about the only ones who had hits on the charts when they were on Carol's show. So.
And the early years, Wes, I think you told me she went heavily on the Broadway people in the first couple of years because she had been on Broadway, and it just made sense for her to tap. I mean, the casting director at the Burnett show probably went to Carol and said, "Who do you want this week?" Because it was Lucy. It was people that she'd known or worked with. And I don't know what the agenda was with their people at CBS and saying, you need to start using people that are not, our CBS shows, the pressure to use people from their shows. But Carol and Joe's thing was, I want somebody else who's going to be comfortable with me, comfortable enough to do the music the way they want to do it. And so for Carol and Joe, it was comfort. It wasn't expediency. Well, let's get somebody in here from a CBS show so we can push their show. Is that a lot of people don't know how to do variety. There are a lot of actors who would never do variety. They don't understand the format.
Yeah, and Carol had a lot of big names on the show. Let's not be uncertain about it. She had Bing Crosby. She had Burt Reynolds when he was hot there and going on there. And, Rock Hudson was considered big at the time when she had that. There were just some that she relied on more than others that you would not think of typically as big comedy variety stars like Roddy McDowall and so on there. If she felt comfortable with someone and they kept giving her what she wanted and needed, she had no problems about bringing them back several times.
She loved Burnett, Peter. She adored Burnett. Because Burnett came, as Carol said, if you were willing to come to play in the sandbox with them every week and you left your ego at the door, you were willing to be silly and be playful and not say, hey, look, I'm a Broadway star. I don't do that. Yeah. She'd have you back. And Burnett became a regular, a semi-regular. She used Mel Torme quite a bit in the early years.
Yep. John Biner, remember John Biner?
I love John Biner.
He was I think he might have made a good regular on the show because he was so talented and versatile on what he played and had a good rapport with everyone at the same time.
My dad adored John Biner, and I told John Biner that in an email a couple of months ago. I said, if there's anybody that probably naturally, without forcing it, made my father laugh, it was probably you. And I'm not slamming Tim. I'm just saying John could break my father up naturally. He didn't have to go for breaking up anybody else. He didn't have to break the fourth wall. Yeah. John just could naturally do it. And she had Jonathan Winters on a couple of times.
Yep. There's a whole list of I think Carol had about 200 guest stars on her show, and you'll find that most of them came back a second or more time. That kind of tells you that she was happy with most of her guest stars. I think that's a good
They were probably also happy, too, to come back.
Yeah.
They enjoyed it also.
You could tell some of those, when you watch the end of those shows and people, when they're writing in her guest book, you can tell they were writing a lot of stuff. Some of them, would just say how much.
Ken Berry is another person she used, Jack Weston.
Yep.
Well, she adored Ken Berry. Of course, Ken Berry is a part of the Burnett show, Mama's Family World. So,
yep.
Carol, the joke on the Burnett show was, if Stephen Eady and Tim Conway are not on this week, who is on this week? Because she got into
the interesting thing about that, and I didn't realize it until I worked on the book, Steve and Edie were never on the same show together. They would be on different shows. 1 week would have Edie, and another week would have Steve. Right. But everyone's used to, saying Steve and Edie, but they never did the same show. Yeah. That was the interesting thing. And Carol was intimidated by Edie Gourmet singing. She just thought, how can I sing with her? She's got a great voice and everything. And Edie would go, yes, I do. Thank you very much. Now let's do our work, okay? Can we do that?
Edie was very humble.
Yeah, and Carol definitely, I think, worried about her singing a great deal on that show more than anything else. I think that was one area where she felt sometimes intimidated. She liked doing the duets with everyone, but it was, kind of a challenge there because she did feel a little out to sea in that area.
Well, think about it. Look who she had. She had Ray Charles, Ethel Merman. Mm-hmm. She had Pearl Bailey.
Ella Fitzgerald was on there too, wasn't she?
Who was?
Petula Clark?
Petula Clark, she had on several times. Yeah. Oh, do we want to get into the Petula Clark thing there?
Oh my God, my father.
I'll start it there.
Okay.
You started.
Good. Okay, so the sixth season went pretty well. The sixth season went pretty well for several things. They had the new writers worked out pretty well. They had some of their best shows. They had guests like Lily Tomlin and Ruth Buzzy and some others that went. It was a really good season. But there was an incident with Tim and Petula Clark doing one show, and Harvey was in a mood that week. And
that week?
Especially that week. Okay.
Especially that week.
Yeah.
And after the taping, Carol went into his dressing room and told him, okay, Harvey, it's obviously you're not happy here, so we're just going to talk to your agent, and we'll go ahead and get things negotiated and get you out of the contract, and you can go out and do anything you want. Well, that shocked him a great deal.
Carol never fired my father in her life.
Yeah, take it from there. Tell what happened next year.
She said, Harvey, if you're not happy, now we're used to your mood, and you want to be cranky with us because we're used to you. But you can't be surly with our guests. Tim knows you more than everybody else. But Petula had never done. I don't think Petula had done a lot of variety at that point, and they were doing as the stomach turns. And Petula, who probably does not have an ear, and she's a musical person, so musical people usually have a great ear for timing. She was not getting some kind of subtext or a reference point as the stomach turn sketch. And my dad said, what is your problem? You got to understand what the line is. You have to understand what we're doing here. It's like we only have a certain amount of time to rehearse. Mm-hmm. But the way it came off, and now there's a constructive way of saying, let's make this work, and there's an unconstructive way of saying, let's make this work. My father decided to go his way, and he got a little surly with Petula Clark, who's probably looking at this guy and going, what an asshole. And she, pardon my French, but Carol said, you don't do that. I can talk to Petula. Joe can't talk to her and explain what's going on, but you're not in a position to be talking to our guest stars that way. So long story short, she said, here's the thing. If you want off the show, tell me. And my dad said, well, can I come back next week? I said, all right, here's the rule. Next week, if I see you coming off the elevator, I want you whistling and jogging or hopping down the hallway. She said, what? I said, I want to see you whistling and skipping with a smile on your face come Monday or you're out of here. So that Monday comes for the first reading. She sees my father. They freeze, 2 deers caught in the headlight. He looks at her. She looks at him. He starts whistling and jogging down the hallway. And that's when she put on his door, Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. It's a sarcastic way of reminding him, no more cranky stuff from Mr. Korman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my father was probably less surly after that.
Oh, that's good. But listen, it's a work situation,
Yeah.
But I wanted to get on with why did Lyle? I can't even talk straight. My mouth is dry. I'm sorry. Lyle Wagner. I mean, why did he leave the show?
All right. Lyle left the season after the Harvey incident. I think this is the 7th season. By this time, the show was still doing very well. It moved to Saturday nights, which made Carol very happy. It was on in that classic lineup of having that year in 73, 74. You could watch on Saturday nights on CBS All in the Family, MASH, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the Bob Newhart Show, and the Carol-Burnett Show, which between them all, they were all, I think Fred Silverman said 4 out of every 10 sets, at least 4 out of every 10 sets in the country were watching those shows that night. It was just incredible how popular they were, and add the number of Emmys in there, and you've got an astounding figure too. But amid all this, Lyle been on the show there for 7 years, and he was kind of interesting, and he wanted to get paid more. Basically, he thought he'd been there and doing that he was there as the announcer, but he also did a lot of acting and some singing with the show and dancing, that sort of thing. And he basically thought that he should be getting a pay increase. And Joe Hamilton, God love him, a good producer but a tough producer, told him basically, I don't think you're worth paying extra for more pay increase here. So Lyle took the gamble and went ahead and decided to leave the show that year. And it eventually paid off for him, and he got the regular role on Wonder Woman and so on there. And then later he went to do things behind the cameras and had a successful career at the time. But it seemed shocking to many people at the time that he would leave the show that basically gave him the prominence, because when he got the role, he had only done a few commercials and a really bad movie, I think Swamp Creature, I can't remember, I've got it in the book or something, before the Carol-Burnett show. And it was a real stunning development there, and one that I think that Joe Hamilton decided when he left, okay, we're going to see how things go. We're not going to replace him. Instead, he kind of doubled down, and you'll kind of note that in the following season when it was just Carol and Harvey and Vicky, he pretty much put a lot of heavy hitters. He had like a lot of big guest stars come in from other CBS shows. He had Buddy Ebsen come in. He had William Conrad singing, which is a scary concept in itself.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Alan Alda did a show, and Rock Hudson did his first show. And if you watch some of those shows, there was a really heavy workload on some of the guest stars there. Gene Stapleton and Phil Silvers, some of them would be in almost every sketch there, which was unprecedented. It used to be, one would be primarily singing, and then one would be primarily comedy. And the show continued to do well in the ratings and hold up that way the season without it. But I think they realized that there was something missing there, and that's when they made the decision to make Tim a permanent regular.
Tim Conway, yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I used to watch it, that it just seemed like no matter what skit they were in, they just couldn't hold it together. I was laughing.
That was Tim's responsibility of doing that. Tim would study the script, and he would also study the sets that they would have set up for each schedule. And what he would do the scripts pretty much the way as written during They had two shows. They called them the dress show and the air show. And what they do is they take the best, supposedly, from each show to put the final show together when they tape them, combine the tapes. Well, Tim would do the first show pretty much by the lines. And the second show, he would do something unprepared, totally different. Everyone would have to watch it. And the victim usually was, of course, Harvey, because many of the sketches would involve Tim and Harvey put together because of the contrast and the size and the approach and everything. And, you could tell that something was going to go awry when there'd be a look in Harvey's eyes like, where did that come from? And then, he'd have to crack up a lot of times from what that happened. Now, that was funny, but there are some people who really don't like it because of how often it happened, that it, it kind of cut away from what would be a pretty good sketch in and of itself from what they had there at the same time. And there's one thing to keep in mind, too. As much as Tim did this, Tim could not keep it together whenever Harvey dressed up as Mother Marcus. Mother Marcus in drag, the big character, what he doing as the stomach turns, and they'd be like, you watch that and you see everybody seemed to have the hardest time keeping the straightest face because of the way Harvey looked and acted. It was good that way, The one person on the show who kept it together the most was Vicki Lawrence. I think she kind of did it, and I think she's the one who eventually put Tim in this place in the final season with the elephant story. I think they've shown that a pretty big blooper thing. Yeah. He's telling a story, and then after he's finished and everybody's in hysterics, then Vicki, as Mama says, are you sure that little burp is finished talking? And everybody cracks up totally because Vicki knew ahead in advance that he was going to do this stuff. And she's like, was telling her husband at the time, God, I can't believe he always gets away with this. And he said, well, why don't you put him in his place? And she did that way. Yeah.
My dad was one of those people, and a lot of people, and you can ask 100 people, and 50 will say they loved it. They liked the immediacy. They liked the fact that these people were not doing Playhouse 90. There was an accessibility to these performers that they could break up. You made them feel closer. My father did not like it. He hated it because my father was such a disciplined performer, and he was on script, and he felt if the script and the writing was there, you shouldn't have to break the fourth wall. And this is not my father being, bitter or unhappy. It's just that he figures as a performer, you don't break the fourth wall unless the writing has gone awry. Now, remember, you had Barry Levinson. You had some great writers on that show. Mm-hmm. It could either elevate the writer, but sometimes it can hinder the writer because the writer says, well, I don't have to write really great stuff this week because Tim will save everything. That's not a good thing to depend on.
Right.
Because you need structure. You have a 7-minute sketch. My dad said, within a 7-minute sketch, you have to tell a story. You have to have the laughs. You have to give character. And if we go awry and we go off script, then it's hard to get back to where you wanted to originally be.
Right.
But the part of the history of the Burnett show, the fabric of the show is, it's Tim and Harvey. I didn't really particularly care for the breaking up as frequent as it was. Once in a while, as you said, and as Wesley said, once in a while it's fine, but it became chronic. Yeah. I mean, it was like
to a point, yes. I'm going to not rush you, but we're coming to I got another 10 minutes here.
Sure.
So what is it? The end. What happened at the end though is with Harvey leaving the show and how that affected the show, mm-hmm. and how did that all come to be?
Basically, what happened is that. By the 10th season, Fred Silverman, who was head of CBS and enjoyed Carol-Burnett's show, in fact, was one of its biggest backers when he became president in 1970, he wanted to kind of raid the talent that he had in the other shows, and he made a pitch to Harvey about why don't you get your own series and star in it and get it together that way. And Harvey, at the time, he was around the age that Kris and I are now around in middle age, and he's like, well, I've been doing comedy variety now for about 14 years nonstop. This sounds like a good thing. Let me go ahead and get it together. He had also been very smart at the time because he had a good comment there. He said, I think the show's getting tired now. I think we're repeating ourselves, and we need to kind of wrap it up. So this is why I'm going to be going there. So he leaves, and they had a big 10th anniversary show, and Carol gave a nice, warm farewell to Harvey on that one as well. But then after doing that, the show decided to continue going on. ABC put on a new show called The Love Boat against it, which did a lot of damage to it because it had been well received as some TV movies ahead of time. Meanwhile, without Harvey on there, the series replaced him with Dick Van Dyke, who they said, Joe Hamilton said was going to be a co-star to Carol, and that was never really clear what it meant. What it meant to the writers was that, well, we're going to make Dick do the same things that we are having Harvey do. And it was a disaster. Dick was clearly out of his element there and not feeling good. The show's ratings started to tank. Dick left after 12 weeks. They moved the show to Sunday nights. It did somewhat better, but it was just they didn't have a good replacement for Harvey. And so when Carol made the announcement that it would be her last season there in February of '78, it shocked a few people, but most people thought, well, that's kind of good. It's 11 years run. Let's do it. And it did have a run up there. Now, as to what happened to Harvey, I think Kris can tell you what happened in that regard.
The funny thing about my dad going over to ABC in '77, that Silverman said, we'll put a sitcom where you can play a variety artist who is now a teacher. So he became Harvey Kavanaugh, who taught acting in a school within his house, and it was Christine Lottie played his daughter one time, and another woman played his daughter in the second pilot, and Barry Van Dyke, Dick's son, played her boyfriend. Yeah, of all people. Now, the irony of this is, and unless you watch the Hall of Fame interviews with my father, most people don't know this. My father was offered the Gavin McLeod role before Gavin.
Wow.
And I don't know if Wesley knew that, but...
No, I did not.
And he said, I don't want to do 12-hour days on a one-camera show, and I don't want to be prancing around in women's clothing anymore, singing and dancing with Ethel Merman and Van Johnson, and I certainly don't want to do 12-hour days anymore. Now, it would have been great money for him, but I think my father, after 14 years, as Wesley said, working consistently, he wanted to be able to do a short half-hour week, which is 4-day weeks, and have his vacations to himself.
Yeah.
And now, mind you, Bernie Coppell, who was on Love Boat, who was my dad's dearest friend for about 40 years, he would have loved working with Bernie. It's just that my dad didn't want that schedule. The irony is that he would have felt really weird being on a show that kicked off the show that he was on. Yeah. And I think he might have considered that a slap in the face to Carol. And he said, I don't want to play that character. I mean, I have great legs for those kind of shorts that they wear on the show because I have great tennis knees. But other than that, I don't want to play that kind of role again. I don't want to. I don't want to play one role all week. But it is. I said, Wesley tell you, there's 12-hour one-camera shows. Unless you have the stamina and the patience for it, and my father didn't. He'd rather stay home, eat a tuna sandwich, have a beer, and watch the Dodger game, and hang out with his family, and be productive with family. But he did. Which the irony is, he did about 5 or 6 Love Boats. So, once a year they would do a cruise. But my dad going over to ABC, I think he had to figure out just how hard it is to be a star, and he figured out that's not me. I'm not a star in that sense. Tim had more shows than anyone. That's why his license plate's at 13 weeks. Mm-hmm. And my dad said, I'm not Carol. I'm not Caesar. I'm not these people. And I think you have to realize your value is that my dad is a great second banana. In the vernacular of the business, he didn't consider that a terrible thing. I mean, look who he was a second banana to. Jack Benny, Skelton, Lucy, Carol, Mel. So he considered it an honor to work with these people.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people whose ego, Wesley will bear this out of me, he talked to a lot of people who said, I might have been able to do what Harvey did. I don't know. I mean, you have to be able to suck it up and realize you're not the star of the show, but you're an integral part of a show, and that has its own value. Mm-hmm. It would have been nice if my dad would have stayed on for the last year. It would have might have gone on for another year. I don't know. But
I don't know. I'm thinking, though, really, I've seen most of the shows the last year, and there was a step down in the writing. Some of the writers who had been there, like you mentioned, Barry Levinson and so on, there had left. The new writers were not coming up with memorable new things to do on the show. It was and Carol's guest selection, there were only a couple of new guest stars, and they were on a level like the Captain and Tennille and everything nice, but not anything that you'd want to, turn your evening over to see.
But don't you think so? It comes a time in a show when it has to end, though?
Yeah, I think and it seemed like it gave the indications like it really needed to do so. As I note in the book, that season they did their third salute. You know how they salute movie studios? They did their third salute to the MGM studios, and they had and within it was their third takeoff on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When you're doing retreading material that much, even with new twists, that's a sign you're getting kind of desperate to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's phenomenal to last as long as it did.
Oh,
really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
because
definitely.
Nowadays the shows don't last that long.
No, and you can't, and we've seen it since. It was the last great big nighttime variety show, I mean, Saturday Night Live, yes, but that's late at night, and that's not the same thing. This had, regular orchestra and regular dancers and everything, and it was, kind of like ever since then, nothing's been able to capture it the way it has.
I mean, Laughing, Wesley, help me. Laughing, what, 4 years or 5?
Laughing was 6 years, yeah.
Okay, and D. Martin.
Yeah, go ahead.
D. Martin had done 9 years, 65 to 74.
Yep.
So, I mean, there are, for lack of a better word, Jeannie, I would say that I don't think they could find anybody who could do variety after 78. That wasn't a ratings point with them. It's just that the genre had changed. It was sitcoms, it was drama, and to find people who could do variety. I know Wesley knows this better than I do. I know that Mary had tried one and Dick had tried one.
Yeah.
No, it would never. I don't think it would work because it's different generations, different. We get so many stations now. We've got the HBO, we've got Amazon, we've got Netflix. So there's so many different places now that it wouldn't work. But I think at that time it was valuable as a family to watch it.
Yes.
As opposed to, say, like we're talking about Saturday Night Live, which is a different group they're gearing to.
Yes, exactly. Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's phenomenal, really. I really want to thank you both. I would love you to both come back on again and do additional talking about this book, and because I think it was such a great era for people to know about it. Yeah.
It would be my pleasure.
I would love you both.
Mine too, Jeannie. Yes.
You really would, and then and maybe we can do a live one where we could maybe get some people coming in and asking questions and stuff like that. If you'd be interested in that,
that'd be great.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So maybe after. I don't know, I don't even know, maybe late December or something like that, or before Christmas, something we could promote.
Well, I know the collection's coming out soon from Star Vista.
The anniversary one? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I've got the 50th anniversary. I just got it, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm going to have to save up for that.
Yeah. It's most of it's what you've already seen there, Chris. I mean, there's some...
Right.
You know what it is. We've talked about it before. But,
yeah.
I saw a few episodes that I'd not seen previously, but I didn't, it pretty much squared with what I put in the book of what the TV guide summaries were about them. There's nothing. The big thing to me was that I finally saw the episode where Harvey was in the Carol and Sis sketch. Harvey was waiting for his head to be hit by the door, as it normally ended with the kitchen door, but Carol didn't do it and pulled it back, and Harvey died laughing because of the change on that. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many memorable moments, but I think it was also a family group of people there that brought entertainment to the family, which none of us really sit down. Do we all sit down with our family and watch TV now? I doubt it.
No.
Yeah, I really doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, so, like I said, some of my happiest memories were watching that show with my dad, and he died laughing when several times just watching that show.
I just have to say one thing. There's one sketch I remember. Absolutely, I loved it. Was the one on the take on the Gone with the Wind.
That is the classic.
Oh my God. I just couldn't. I can remember to this day, laughing so hard I couldn't handle it.
Well, I'll tell you, the irony is Rick Hawkins and Liz Sage, who got jobs based on that one sketch that they wrote and submitted to Joe. Most people don't realize this. Wesley will know this. Is that Rick and Liz were pages at NBC.
Yep.
Wow.
Hello. And it's funny that they submitted the sketch, they hit all the big moments, and Joe that week said after it aired, "You want a job as writers?" And the only other thing you would know Rick and Liz from is that they went on to do Major Dad with Gerald McRaney, and they had done Mama's Family, but that was their first sketch that ever aired. What a way to enter the business with Went with the Wind.
Yeah.
Remember, your dad said he was having trouble getting a hold of the Clark Gable character until he finally got the voice right in the nick of the time for the taping, and it was magnificent. Oh my!
It was because the whole week. You think about it, the whole week, Jeannie, is they don't get into the studio until Thursday because Price is Right is in stage 33 the whole week, so they don't get to rehearse until Thursday.
Wow.
So
Talk
Carol
about
and both.
Close.
Yeah, I mean, Carol and my dad both, don't get into the costume until probably, maybe Friday for a dress rehearsal. So they didn't really get a sense of how the dress was going to work. Because originally, and Wesley helped me with this, that originally Bob was just going to throw the curtain over her head.
Yeah, the original
and leave it at that.
Was going to be the curtains without, and then Bob Mackey said, we need something else, and he came up with the idea of the curtain rod and everything. And Carol was smart enough to realize what a great comic setup this was and showed Harvey what it looked like in advance. So that's why Harvey doesn't crack up like everyone else does when they see the thing there. If you watch the show, Don Crichton played a guy who got hit in the background. You can see him actually coming to life and laughing to death on the ground because that's the first time he'd seen it too.
It was so funny, really. Well,
I have to tell you that I think Dinah Shore really nailed the character, Melanie, and Tim doesn't do Leslie Howard because Tim doesn't know how to do that type of character. I mean, no one thought him doing Brashley he was doing Leslie Howard because I don't think people really knew who Leslie Howard was anyway. But I thought my father, that probably, if any skit, probably let people know just how incredibly versatile my father was.
Well, it definitely
that sketch probably did it.
Yes. Well, I can't believe we're coming to the end. I want you. We didn't even talk about where you can purchase the book, Wesley. Amazon.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell people where they can purchase it?
The book is published by Bear Manor Media, and that's Bear like in Grizzly Bear, and Manor as in To the Manor Born, MANOR. They have a website, or you can go online on Amazon. It's there, too. It's the Carol-Burnett Show Companion, and my name is Wesley Hyatt. That's like the hotel, HYATT, and it's available both in softcover and hardback, whichever one you prefer, and you're going to take some time because it's over 500 pages, but I think it's 500 pages you're really going to enjoy reading.
Well, I think people should think about it because as much as we don't want to talk about it, Christmas is around the corner.
Yeah.
And this would make a great, great Christmas gift for people that really love that show. And this would be a definite great companion for them to read it and know that they had seen all these different sketches. And Kris, what is going on with you? Anything you would like to?
I've been relegated to playing de facto agent to people in LA, in other parts of this country, and basically helping them maneuver through the business of show business and helping them find agents and using my name, Korman, for what it is worth, to help people who don't have the luxury of having my name. And I don't mean that arrogantly, but I've always said, if you're going to use our name, use it to elevate the brand of others, the careers of others.
Oh, definitely. I agree with you.
And my father did that. But I want to say one thing. If there's any greatest blessing of this book, and there are many unfathomable blessings of this book, two of them are you and Wesley. Because I would never have known you two if this show had not had happened.
Correct.
It's my connections with you and Wesley and Ed Robertson and people I've got to know because of the Burnett Show book. And I consider Wesley as close to a brother as I can get. I don't just adore him just as a writer, but as a human being.
That's terrific. So, that's great stuff to say, Kris. That's wonderful.
I feel the same way about you too, Jeannie. I mean, all of you just have extended me the platform to talk about my father, probably to some people to nauseam, maybe, I don't know. But
no, I don't think so. No.
But it is, I tell people, go not only get the book of Wesley's book, but like I said, read it, love it, absorb it, and then go watch the Star Vista things, and then you'll have a far greater appreciation and enjoyment and love for these shows. But only they should only do it after they read Wesley's book.
Definitely. Well, thank you both. I would more than welcome. I would like both of you to come back again, in maybe around Christmas time, if it's up to you, or maybe the first of the year, and maybe we'll do a live show and where we can announce it and we can get some questions and answers for you. That may take a little longer for people asking questions and stuff, but that's okay. I think it's good for people to participate. And but I don't know how to thank you, both of you. I know you're both very busy, and I don't know what time it is. What time is it in California right now?
It's probably close to 11, which means it's about almost
quarter past 2 for me over here in Massachusetts.
Well, again, like I said, any day with a teenager is not a boring day. I have my Lanta and aspirin right next to me. Okay. Most days.
Do you both want to give some closing words to the audience?
If
you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I would just say that the Carol-Burnett Show is a classic. Every list of best television shows has it on there. I think I've done my best to try and cover it from every angle possible. I talked to network executives like Fred Silverman, to some of the dancers, some of the people involved in the orchestra, the writers, one of the directors, Roger Beatty, even one of the editors, just to give a good sense of what it was like to put on that show and to get it together, and many of the guest stars too, and their memories. And I think it's a good book. I don't shy away from some of the challenges that the show had, but at the same time, it was not anything scandalous or anything. I don't think anyone's going to leave here disappointed or unhappy about what they learned from the show.
I have to add a caveat to that Wesley, being a fan of the show, had that right to express within the book what works and what doesn't work, but not in a way that says that he's being judgmental about it. But Wesley has a great analytical mind in his own way, so he could approach it from what didn't work for him as a fan, but as someone who's a pop culture historian himself, and he could talk to people who love those type of shows. So yes, he wrote it as a literary talent, but he wrote it with the mentality of a fan. And I think that's why it's a great book, because Wesley doesn't talk at you. He's sharing stories about this great show and those who participated in the show, and it draws you closer to the show. Because, again, for me, I feel like every time I read another chapter, I relive my childhood again. And that is the best thing. That's the best thing about the book, other than the friendship that Wesley and I have forged. It is, to me, like his book. To me, is like his book is like, for me, is my wedding ring, my graduation certificate. It's a tapestry of my life, and I will never forget that. And I can never ever thank Wesley enough.
Well, thank you
for the book and for his friendship.
That's great. Wow,
I feel the same way about you too, Jeannie. I really do.
Thank you.
Considering when Ed said, "Hey, I know a perfect person you should talk to," and I said,
Ed
"Who?"
Robinson.
I said,
He's
"Jeannie."
Really good. Yeah.
Ed is great in that. So, so I guess I can say what Wesley might have said, which is, I'm so glad we had this time together.
Yes, of course.
Really, so glad, truly, yes. Well, thank you both. I hope you have a good day today on Sunday. Too. Enjoy the rest of the day. And I want to thank you again for being on the show. And hopefully we will have you both back either by sometime in December or maybe the first of the year. That would be
wonderful. I would look forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you. I want to thank the audience for listening to this absolutely terrific show about Carol-Burnett and Harvey-Korman and all the other people that played on that show. You can hear this. I will let you know when you can hear this. I'll be emailing it out. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great day. See you on the radio. Bye now. Jeannie White from Passionate World Radio Network. Bye now.